On this episode of the Casually Human podcast with Martin Kigondu, we have a warm and fantastic chat with Moses Kemibaro. Moses is a founder and CEO of .savvy. This is Kenya's first digital business agency, which has, for the last 20 plus years, been spearheading next practices across a broad spectrum of digital offerings. Having previously worked with and for impressive brands in the digital and or marketing spaces, influence in the African space, Moses is a multi-award winning technology entrepreneur, or techprenuer if you like, a blogger, a podcaster, and a prolific analyst, most active on moseskemibaro.com, just as you say it, moseskemibaro.com, where he rants and raves about all things digital in Kenya and across Africa. He's also one of the region's leading digital marketing trainers and speakers, and for everything digital, check out his podcast, Pure Digital Passion Podcast. Well, here's my casual chat with the main man himself as he shares gems from his reflections and iterations through his journey so far. What a man. That's all I'll say. Enjoy. I'm hoping the answer could be around my curiosities. But wherever this question takes us, I'm fine with it, yeah? The man that you are today, what do you think is the coolest thing, quote unquote, that a 10-year-old you would think you've accomplished so far?
A 10-year-old me would think that I've accomplished so far. If anything, I think I've always been attracted to technology, even from a young age. Dabbling, playing around with technology, computers, gadgets of every kind. So I'd almost imagine if I was my 10-year-old self, I'd probably get super jazzed by the fact that over the years, I managed to acquire various bits of technology, nice laptop, tablets, DSLR cameras, and all sorts of different things that I use in my work. So I think, probably that would probably impressed me, if I was 10 years old, that I have all these gadgets, and I use them for what I do.
Okay, I like that, because I just learned that you started coding quite early. We could talk about that season of your curiosities around coding, then we'll paint everything else out from what your parents were doing in that season, your siblings around you, where you are in the world. But particularly for now, let's start with the curiosities around coding.
Okay, if you're as old as I am, meaning that you actually experienced the 80s, there was a phase where home computers became a thing. Okay, they became affordable. There were two flavors that were quite common. One was called the Commodore 64. Another one was called the Spectrum. Okay, Sinclair Spectrum. So I remember this quite vividly. I think it was either 1983 or 1984. It was Christmas, and normally my parents would buy us each individually gifts. But instead, my dad said, today, you're all getting one gift, because it cost so much.
Okay.
And when he unwrapped it, it was this computer, right? And of course, we didn't know what it was, we didn't know how it worked, but he was a very progressive, technology-forward person. And he said, here's your computer, and you guys will need to figure out how to use it. You can play games, da-da-da-da-da. And he put it there in front of us. Now, as it turns out, with me and my immediately older brother, are the ones who were were into gaming and sort of into technology in the way that we were. During that particular holiday over Christmas, we got to set it up, and I think some games came with it and stuff. And we started to fiddle around with this thing. And in the process of doing this, we kind of learned how to actually create software, because at some point my dad was like, look, I'm not buying you any more games. I'm going to give you a book, which he got from one of his trips abroad, and said, you learn how to code the games for yourselves. So me and my brother on the weekends and late into the night would be there typing and trying to understand what each line of code meant and how it worked. And of course, with the games, we then started to understand that if you do this, you can give yourself infinite lives. If you do that, you can do different things. And by the way, this is the days before UPS, right? So if Kenya Power went off, you lost everything.
You're done.
Okay? But we learned how to code. That's how we learned how to get into sort of understanding how the software works. And from that point onwards, if you ask me, I think that's really the journey towards what my career is today, because from that point onwards, because I was so interested, my dad, I think, also got himself a computer in the office for his engineering work. He was a civil engineer. And somewhere along the way, even enrolled me into classes where my classmates were all accountants and senior managers in companies, learning how to use Lotus 123, learning how to use DBase 3 and 4. And there was this young kid who was about 11 or 12 years old, learning to do these things right next to them.
Yeah.
And I'm very privileged and grateful for that experience, because it really allowed me to immerse myself into the world of computing. And as it turns out, later on, university and stuff, I continued this trend, so that when the internet came along, I was actually ready for it.
Yeah.
I could see it for what it was. I could see what it could become, which is why I was one of the first people in that industry when it came to working and being employed in the internet space.
Yeah.
So from that computer in the home, the progression was from that point onwards, it ended up landing me where I am today.
Look at that. I'm pretty sure your 11-year-old self is totally proud of who you are today. Okay, that's what's up. Now let's circle that season. Where are you living? I know you have roots in Mombasa and in KZ and all that. Yeah. So tell us a bit about your life then, and how it progresses up to your, say, in your early 20s thereabout.
Okay, so growing up was Mombasa.
Yeah.
That's where we grew up. We're a big family, my parents and 6 children. So I have four brothers. Well, we're 4 brothers, 2 sisters, 6 children. And yeah, we grew up in Mombasa. And I think for me, Mombasa was back then was a magical place. Meaning, if you know anything about coastal culture, it's very close. It's very family oriented. It was a nice upbringing. Went to school there. We obviously lived there. And I think from a family values perspective, I think we were brought up well. Yeah, I think my parents were very much about traditional values. And in a small coastal town like Mombasa at the time, everyone knew everyone. Everyone is in everyone's business. But basically, it was just a nice, wonderful place, I think, to bring up children back then. Not too developed like Nairobi. Of course, Mombasa and the coastal towns are known for being a bit sleepy. One recollection I have is the way that those days there's so little traffic that you'd go to school and then you'd get picked up for lunch and go home for lunch and go back to school in the afternoon. And, things were just very simple. It was very easy to get around. And yeah, it was idyllic. And I think we had many great family friends and we grew up there. And yeah, it was a good time. It was a good moment. And of course, until now, obviously in later years, now going to high school, that's when I went to boarding school and things like this. My older siblings also eventually went to places like the US and stuff. I came to Nairobi, I did some time at USIU. And yeah, that was really Mombasa. But I think for me, and even when I meet people from Mombasa in Nairobi, we have almost this belief or clique that we're kind of a bit different from the Nairobi people.
How so?
I think we're quieter, we're more family values, more chilled, more polite, I think.
Okay.
I think. And even till today, many of the family friends and the people we're associated with in those years are still very close to us, as a family, as individuals and so forth,
Yeah.
Although the place itself has completely changed in the last, 20, 30 years.
It's a long time.
So much has changed over there,
So Nairobi.
Yeah, so when I moved to work here, I think for me, it was very clear to me, like, this is where Nairobi is where I need to be for my career, because I could see what my peers were doing in the space. I could see how they're performing. I could see all the startups starting to grow in the ecosystem. And I just knew I had to be here. Right? So I came without no job offer, literally carried my computer or something, and ideas came, and I said, I'm not leaving until I get a job.
Okay.
So I think 2 or 3 weeks later, meanwhile, I was enjoying the money I'd made working hard in sales. I finally got the offer from 3 Mice. And if you knew about 3 Mice at the time, they were like the first digital agency here. They were building the coolest websites, or working for people like Kenya Postal Directories. The Yellow Pages were a thing then.
Yellow Pages, yes.
They were doing work, I think, for people like KCB and so forth. So when I got here, I was just like, I need to work with these guys. Because I could already see that Africa Online was already talking to them about the possibility of buying them. And I joined 3 Mice. It was a small team at the time. And shortly thereafter, Africa Online invested, I think, $500,000 in them. And that meant they got a new office, they hired more people, and boom, I was in there.
Yeah.
And I think for me that was really interesting, because I moved from being in an internet service provider that had a web department to being in an agency that happened to do web marketing.
Yeah.
Okay, two different things. And really from there, always along the way, I knew at some point I might want to start my own thing.
Okay.
So I worked with them for a number of years, and what tended to happen is that we'd have clients who could not afford what we were charging, but still needed a website. And they'd say, look, I can't afford $3,000, but I can afford $1,000. Can you do something for $1,000? And that's how the moonlighting started. So after work, on the weekends, I'd meet these small travel agents and people, and then, word goes around, and they're like, look, talk to Moses, he can get you a website for a reasonable price. And I was very clear at the beginning to keep the two apart. At that point, I didn't have a company. And at some point, it got so serious, as in the momentum was building, because now I was getting serious potential clients, and they were willing to pay me, and me specifically, to do this other work. So at some point, I really had this conflict, and I ended up deciding to resign.
Yeah.
And that's when I set up .savvy.
.savvy.
Yeah.
Okay. At least twice so far, you have stepped away from a gig, an already working thing. You're doing pretty good in Mombasa. You're like, okay, I think that's enough. Let's go to
But I reached a
Nairobi.
ceiling.
Exactly.
It's not going to get better.
3 miles, ceiling, I'm out. Yeah? Is there anything you could attribute to that, probably in your past? Do you remember, like, you being that sort of child? I'm seeing it in your parents somewhere in there.
Actually, my dad.
Your dad?
Yeah.
Also?
See, my dad had worked for people like the East African community. He worked in the East African railways and harbors and so forth. This is, of course, before the original East African community broke up. And he got kind of thrown around a bit. He didn't know what was going to happen. He had a family of, many kids. And he says, I don't know what happened exactly, but he kept telling us, even when we were growing up, whatever you guys do, make sure you work for yourself. Because he's like, when I worked for these other people, I went through so many bad experiences. The only time I found satisfaction and control over who I am and what I'm doing is when I was self-employed. So it was kind of something that he kept drilling into us, that, do the jobs and all if you must, but work towards being your own boss or your own business owner. And I think for me, in the back of my mind, that was always there, that he was my reflection or my inspiration, that if he could do it and be very successful in what he did, then I too could do the same. So I had this blueprint to follow, that, do the work, learn the work, and then when you're feeling competent enough and you feel you've reached the limits of it, start your own thing, which is exactly what I did. Yeah.
Oh, that's quite powerful.
Yeah.
That is quite powerful, especially from the, what do you call them, the Uhuruzens.
Yeah, the Uhuruzens.
It feels like your dad was very, very, very smart and forward thinking and very well put together.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about where he came from, he was always breaking boundaries, He was always pushing to the limits. Even the way he got a computer very, very early in the profession, when others were discussing computers, he was actually using it. So he was very much an unconventional guy.
Look at that. Look at that. Okay. Let's come back to, you've started your company. I'm not assuming anything, but there might be some truth in this statement or this question, so ride with it. So my question, let me phrase it as one, would be, at what point as an entrepreneur do you think, oh no, I shouldn't have quit, I shouldn't have done this? Is it a few months in, is it a few years later, Ama did it never cross?
There's something very interesting about transitioning from doing your business as a side hustle to your business becoming the main thing, right? Yeah. And what tends to happen is that when you're still doing it as a side hustle, you still have the comfort of a paycheck and the credibility of, I work at Africon and I work at 3 Miles. And when you go into social scenarios, it's very clear your identity. And the side hustle is kind of in the background, right? It's not the main event. It gives you that extra cash and extra things, but it's not something you're depending on 100% because you still got your paycheck. So the moment you switch and make the call, and at that point, of course, I knew I had some decent pieces of business coming in, because also when I resigned, many of the clients who I was onboarding at a place like 3 Miles, actually, I was going to pick up checks and contracts, and they were like, you're leaving? You're leaving us? And literally, some of them literally just parked the contract and said, we're going to wait for you to start your company and then we'll give you the business. And I'm like, no, please give it to my guys. It's cool. No. We want to work with you. About 4 clients did this. They canceled the contracts and they said, I want to work with you. And meanwhile, I had to go and incorporate the company, set up everything. So this was another conundrum because when I was ready to register the company, I didn't have the money to open the bank account. Those days, if you wanted to open a business account at Standard Chartered, I think you needed a minimum of 100,000 shillings.
Oof.
So I had to take a loan from a friend, open the bank account, and then bank my first checks. Right?
Okay.
Things like this.
Yeah.
But more importantly, the moment you switch off from having a steady paycheck, and now you're depending on these signed up contracts, plus now you have employees because you need somebody to do the work, plus you have to pay for office space, plus all these things. You immediately wake up to the reality that being employed is a very different ball game from being a business owner who's also employing people and has bills and things to take care of. And at that point, I'm telling you, there are moments when you're like, I can't believe I made such a silly decision. I had no idea I was going to have to deal with this. I'll give another example of a case where the phone line in the office had been cut off. I think on our last few thousand shillings, we had a new client who onboarding was based at Wilson Airport. Everything that we were doing at that moment in time depended on that guy signing and giving us the business. So I remember going with my co-director at the time. We rocked up at their offices. We showed them these designs for their website. They were paying us a lot of money. And meanwhile, the phone in the office is not working. Let me tell you why that was significant then. There was a time you did not call people on mobile phones.
Okay.
If you're doing a business transaction, you call them in the office. That was the culture then.
Okay.
You don't call somebody's phone. It's not considered to be etiquette. So we roll up into his office and we're like literally hanging by a thread. I think even in the car, there was only fuel like for going back and a few things. As in, you're broke. And for some reason, he comes in and says, okay, I'm happy with the proposal. I'm happy to proceed. And then he asks us, do you mind if I pay you cash? Now, me and my co-director are very calm. We're behaving calm at that point. No, cash. Are you sure cash? Okay. Yeah, no problem. Meanwhile, you're broke. You have a few hundred shillings in your wallet.
You need the cash, yeah.
So you're sitting there and he's saying, I'm going to give you cash. So his assistant, his PA opens, there was a safe, and I'm seeing dollars and things in there. They grab a couple of words of cash. I think those days it was something like maybe 200,000-300,000 shillings that was a deposit. It was the biggest deal we had done at that point. And we're playing it cool. We're playing like this happens every day. People give us cash. We get into the car. I used to drive a small 205. I got in the car. We drove out of Wilson Airport. And all I remember is that once we passed the gate outside, we were screaming. Yeah, we had seen the face of God.
Oh, serendipity.
The face of God had been shown to us. And this is the thing that happens in entrepreneurship. It's a constant game of feasts and famines. You're going to have moments that are so low, you're wondering why you're doing this. Then you're going to have moments you're so high, and you're saying, thank God I did this. So I'm having this moment where I can see all the effort validated in this moment. That was one of them. And I remember we called the guys in the office. Well, we called them on their mobile phones because the office line was cut off. And said, guys, hang in the office. It was a Friday. We're coming back. We've got the salaries. And we're going to go get drinks.
Hey.
And I think anyone who's in entrepreneurship, you need to understand that dynamic. You're going to have good days and bad days. But it's a choice you make, because to be an entrepreneur means that whatever happens or does not happen is 100% your fault or your blessing. Meaning that extra phone call you make that could make the sale, showing up at that meeting that give us cash, deciding to do things or not do things, in a way that as an employee you can never experience. In fact, I always say that the entrepreneurial journey is like being in a car with no suspensions, no cushions on your seat, in a metal chair, and you're driving your car on a badly pothole road, and you're feeling every bump as you go.
It's a rough ride.
You feel every impact of what you do and do not do as an entrepreneur. And that's a life you must live with if you choose to take that path. There are no moments to rest back and take it easy. You are constantly ticking and doing things that you have to do. In fact, as we speak, I can't remember the last time I went on real leave. I can't go on a holiday and not have my laptop. I always have it somewhere, because that's how it is when you run and own a business.
This is true. This is true. Oh no, I got teary for a minute there. I'm like, hey, you're talking to me.
You know that feeling, huh?
I get it. I totally do. I'm curious, the experience of your, how rough the road is, the terrain is for you as an entrepreneur. Is this now affecting every other relationship in your life? From by this time, the kids are in your life, and all this. Are the effects being felt there as well?
money affects everything.
How
Good
do you
days
handle
and
that
bad
season?
days. Good days and bad days. When the money is good, no one's complaining, everyone is happy. When the money is not good and you're behind on payments and things like this, no one is happy. So, of course, the spillover effect is that there are going to be dynamics in your friendships, your relationships that are going up and down on the fact whether you have money or not. And here's the funny thing, the entrepreneurial journey is that you might have a season of 2 years when everything seems to have finally worked out. And then the following year, something happens and you're back down again. And you go up and down and up and down. It seems to be the way it works. But the question is, are you resilient enough to work through those challenges? And yes, there are relationships that become broken because of financial challenges or constraints. It can be very hard on a couple, a marriage, even your own relationship with your children. If, for instance, you've not been able to pay school fees and for some reason they're sitting in the house. How do you talk to them and have a relationship with them if you're not up to date on that? And the thing is, in the entrepreneurial world, this is quite normal. When we sit down as entrepreneurs, we've had these moments. Like I remember telling one guy, there's a time I used to live in Tigoni and I didn't have much fuel in the car and I think I was waiting for a check to clear the next day. So when I was coming down to Nairobi from Tigoni, I would turn off the engine so I'd save the fuel just enough to get to my house, to the office, and then hopefully I go to the bank and get some money, then I can fuel my car. These are real stories. These are things that happen. But unfortunately, people have now turned entrepreneurship into this sexy thing that looks interesting, which is why we have what we call entrepreneurs, and you have what they call entrepreneurs. You want to be an entrepreneur, and then the entrepreneur. The real entrepreneur is not in a sexy space. The entrepreneur is. But the real guys who are grinding away, doing hard work, it's never sexy. It's hard, painful,
it's marky,
often embarrassing work. But you make the choice because it gives you 100% full control of the outcomes and full accountability for what you do.
Oh, and when it works out, it's a
fantastic.
Beautiful
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly.
Okay. Through all the seasons, especially then, what are you telling yourself internally? How are you putting yourself together, even as a man, just to get up tomorrow and do the thing? What's the internal narrative?
I mean, things have gotten tough over the years, and this is why I'm not in any way embarrassed or shy to say this. There were moments when it got so bad that I had to take jobs. The business is not working. Maybe you and your co-founder are not getting along for whatever reason. And somebody reaches out to you and says, well, there seems to be a job here that I think you can do. It's going to pay you 3-4 times what you currently make in your own company. It'll also give you the opportunity to stabilize your financials. So there have been moments in the past when I kind of stepped away for a couple of years, came back. Of course, I was always involved. In the evenings, I'd be checking the accounts, checking what's happening. But in that season, you're like, look, I must think about myself and my family first in the short term while I figure out how this company is going to work. So it's not always perfect. And there are many of us in entrepreneurship where we might have to step away from day to day and even running the business. And because company X is coming into Kenya, they're looking for somebody who has your capabilities or credentials to help them start something. And meanwhile, as you're figuring this thing out, you can at least maintain some kind of normality in your life and you continue. And that's what we did.
Okay.
And those experiences were fantastic. I set up what was the biggest classifieds business in Kenya at the time, which was Dealfish, which became OLX, which became Gigi. I got to work with companies like Goal.com, which is the largest football website in the world. I worked with companies like in Mobi, in Opera. And many of these things actually allowed me to do something very profound, because until that point as an entrepreneur, you and the company are one. You cannot distinguish Moses from Dotsavi. But when I got these opportunities, what it did is it allowed me to separate myself from the business and realize me and the business are two different things.
Oh, I like that.
Because then I could bring in a general manager, I could bring in a team to take care of the things that I used to do, and they could run the company for that season. And then, of course, I'm checking on them, I'm seeing what's going on, I'm helping them, but I'm not day to day anymore. And that separation of you and the business is something that many entrepreneurs never achieve. They're too ingrained and too much a part of the fabric of their own businesses, to the point that without them, the business would collapse.
Oof. Oh, that's such an important lesson. And even particularly in your line, I see how the separation happens to bring you now into the personal branding space. It feels like at some point it becomes very intentional for you in your career, because now we do know of the Moses, but we also know of the company. Okay, let's pause it there for a minute. So far, so good? Oh, I like seeing people drink and eat, so thank you very much. Good. Aya, just turn to your neighbor and tell them happy International Men's Day. Tell them. Don't be like that.
Some of us didn't even know until you said it today.
You know?
We didn't know.
No, I also didn't know up till Mune posted.
What's that saying about men and how we are loved, huh?
You know. Aya, good. So we are all present, still going at it. And lest you forget, remember this episode of the Casually Human podcast with Martin Kigondu is brought to you by Sugarball. Sugarball is a casual, full-service dining restaurant featuring an inviting indoor and outdoor space with a fresh, unpretentious ambience with warm colors. Perfect for intimate dinners, business meetings, and social gatherings. Their menu is strongly based off a continental cuisine enhanced with Mediterranean and Italian influences. So go, visit, dine, take your girlfriend, your boyfriend, take your book readings, your solo dates, your meetings, birthdays, and so on to the Sugarball restaurant already. They are conveniently located at the Shell petrol station in Spring Valley, napo ni hapa tu Lower Kabete. Again, go check them out. Have a good time and tell them Sugarball came highly recommended by Martin Kigondu from the Casually Human podcast. Let's get back into the convo. Good. I read something on Twitter not too long ago, and they said an entrepreneur becomes the biggest believer, in God and, in that kind of belief along their journey. And clearly yours is a testament of it in that way. Anyway, quite a journey, I'm sure. Let's get back into now the digital space. I could look at it, I'd use two junctures to notice the difference. The first one would be the analog digital migration. It was a big deal for us guys, us guys, especially like filmmakers and stuff, even artists. It was an opportunity to now go to the new TV stations and all this. But then around the same season, I think it's in the second part of the Kibaki administration, a lot is happening in the tech space. Kenya has been recognized as one of those places to look out for. What are you doing in that season of your career? So say late 2010s. And then we'll compare it to the COVID season, the next shift that happens. Okay. So how is that season looking?
I think you need to go back to, was it 2007?
Okay.
It's kind of like where things started to converge in an interesting way, right? Because until that point, I don't even know that Kenya even had 1 million internet users by then, maybe 2 or 3, but you can imagine internet was still a very nascent technology. It's still early days. It's not yet mainstream. Maybe we have 3G, maybe we have 2.5G. Safaricom, even at that point, I don't think is a major internet service provider. And the two things I think that were interesting at that point is probably when we had the post-election violence, as you may recall, we had the arrival of M-Pesa. We had the arrival of Ushahidi, which was that service for incident reporting. Yeah. And then we had the arrival of the fiber cables, the undersea cables, teams and so forth happening. So around those 5 years, all those things happening concurrently. Yeah. Mobile money, M-Pesa, high-speed internet, 3G becomes a thing.
Bitangen demo.
Yeah, exactly. And then we had affordable smartphones like the Huawei Ideos, which was 8,500 shillings. So when you see the convergence of all those things, we suddenly had almost like the foundation for a real digital revolution. Okay, affordable devices, mobile data, high speed, 3G, all these things came together at the time. And of course, at that point in time, it's kind of like I'm in my company, things are looking not so great. And then the other thing that happened then was social media. Because until that point, you can imagine that .savvy was built from the ground up to be exceptionally good at building and managing websites. So social media arrives and everyone, including our clients, is thinking, aha, this is a new bright and shiny thing, but guess what? We don't think our current provider knows what this is. So the first thing that happened is that we remember noticing very quickly that a lot of the ad agencies that were giving us clients woke up to social media even before us. In fact, I remember seeing an ad for, I think it was Scanad at that point. They set up a company called Squad Digital, and they were hiring people And they had a job there called social media community manager. Now that is what we know what it is today.
Yes, we do.
But you got to imagine in the middle of 2008 or something, we're looking, and me and my co-director at the time were like, what is that?
Yeah.
What do they do on social media? What does a community manager do? We didn't know. And immediately I was just like, we're out of our depth. We don't know what this is. We don't know how it works. It is digital, but it's certainly not websites. And that transition was profound, because what immediately happened is that we saw the agencies coming in and decided to consolidate. So if in the past you did work for Coca-Cola through an agency, you did work for Kenya Power, you did work for NIC Bank, they started to consolidate, and they were now taking digital seriously. That was now becoming an existential threat for us, because we didn't have the muscle to hold on to these clients, because all these guys were doing is just pulling back the same clients into the fold, and now we no longer had those clients. And remember, we're like an independent agency. Number two, we don't have the skill set to understand how to run campaigns and all, because what do? We build websites. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We don't do campaigns and big ideas and all that stuff. So the entire DNA of the company had to change, right? And that transition was difficult, because within the company I couldn't see it. But when I left to, let's say, run Dealfish, I could start to see how it works, because now I was out of that environment. I'm seeing how brands are doing digital campaigns, social media, etc. And in fact, what then would happen is that when I came back in, I was able to infuse these new learnings into the company. How do you run a campaign? How do you build a big idea and all this stuff? So we started to rejig the company so that we're now sort of compatible with the new practices of the day. Meaning now you understand social media, you know how to run ads. You're not just wholly reliant on websites.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, even till today, the other business makes probably 80%, whereas these websites and stuff probably bring in the 20%. But that transition for us is what was happening around that time. And that's actually partly why I went off and took another job, because we literally were just falling apart. And I was like, we're not equipped for this new world. And then we had to sort of build the muscles to start doing this other stuff as well.
Different. Okay.
Yeah.
So would you, even before we go to the COVID season, would you say after that pivot, what the company is today feels a little different from what it originally was? So how would you describe that difference?
I think before we were more leaning into the technology side of it, which meant that you had to have a lot of developers, and so it was more about building a platform, right? You would build things. We even built e-learning systems. We're more like tech focused.
So it was techie.
Now I would say that we're more marketing and digital transformation focused, meaning two things have happened. One is we can go to a client, and even we'll do stuff in PR, we'll do video production, we'll do radio. I mean, we can do it all, because we think of ourselves as an agency now, right? But the other thing that has now happened is that with the COVID period, what became very clear is this thing they call digital transformation, where it's not about changing what you do, it's changing how you do it using digital, right? So you're a farmer, how do you now use digital? You're a company involved in manufacturing, how do you use digital? And increasingly we see with our clients where we're actually advising them strategically, the way, say, a McKinsey or an Accenture or PwC would, on the strategy and not just the implementation. Remember before we were like the fundis. Somebody comes to you and says, I need a website. You build it. But you don't understand the strategy, you don't understand the thinking, you just build it. Make it look pretty, put the content in there. Now you're coming back to the same client and saying, no, do you need a website? Or maybe what you really need is a mobile app. Or maybe what you really need is a WhatsApp conversational platform for commerce. So you're now spending more time in the thinking side of it and less being the fundi. And that is a very powerful place to be, because there are times even we're sitting with a client selecting vendors for something. So you're no longer the fundi, you're also in the thinking part of the solutions that you bring to your clients.
Strategy, look at that.
And that, by the way, pays a lot of money. Before that, I would say we're the bottom feeders, we're getting what remained. But when you're in the strategic side of it, when you're sitting and advising and recommending and supporting, you're sitting with the CEO discussing strategy. You're sitting with the COO. And the premium for that time is high, because it's now thinking time. You're not being told build. You're now deciding whether we're going to build. Does that make sense?
It does make a lot of sense. What other lesson would you say, or maybe another shift that came about around the COVID season?
I think for me, the COVID season was instructive in that for the very first time in Kenya, and with all due respect to everyone who was trying to do e-commerce until that point, we weren't really doing it. If you wanted to understand e-commerce, it reminds me like 10 years ago, I was in the UK, we were staying there for a wedding with some friends. And of course, you have Amazon. And I remember literally you'd order your things at midnight in the UK. The next day, the postman arrives and you've got your new camera and things by about 10 a.m. the next morning. That's when I really saw what e-commerce was, right? Now, if you bring that to Kenya today, you can order stuff today at Carrefour and it's delivered in your house in an hour. Quite normal, not a big deal. But that was not possible or not typical before COVID.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing that happened in COVID, and even I came up with an acronym for it, I called it COVID Accelerated Digital Transformation, CADIT, because it's the first time I think in Kenya we really understood that digital can actually replace the way you do things traditionally. Yeah, people stopped going to supermarkets, yet you still had to shop.
Yeah.
You couldn't go to the restaurant, yet you still wanted to order burger and chips. You wanted to go to school, but you couldn't go to school, but you could do it on Zoom. I mean, for heaven's sake, court cases were being done on Zoom, and I think continue to be to this day.
Yeah.
I have clients where we used to have weekly meetings where we'd spend 2 hours in traffic each way. Today, those same culprits don't want to meet you. They're like, no, so we just do Zoom.
Yeah,
we just do Zoom.
Yeah.
Why do you want to come to my office? No, we just do Zoom. And for me, that transformation, that shift to really being digitally first happened because of COVID. And that changed everything in our industry, because now for the first time, people understood that digital was not a nice to have, it was now a must have.
Yeah,
and you saw even in marketing budgets, until that point, it was all print, radio, TV, and so forth.
Yeah.
Now many organizations are doing a 50-50 digital and traditional media. But that shift was only validated when COVID happened and there was no alternative. Your billboard's not going to work because no one is driving on the roads.
Yeah.
So how am I going to reach you?
Yeah.
You can't go for a meeting, therefore you do Zoom.
Okay.
You want to buy your groceries, therefore you buy online. So that transition really elevated the whole space. Yeah.
Okay. What about maybe where we are now and going forward, perhaps, in terms of the social media space especially?
Yeah, I think there are two things I want to talk to you about. One is, I think you alluded to it earlier, the personal branding, content creation space, right? So I've been blogging now for 17 or 18 years. I had one of the first blogs in the country. At one point, I think even it was one of the top websites in the country.
Award winning.
Yes, we won many awards.
Yeah.
But what I've realized over the last 17 years of blogging and so forth, number one, the platforms have won. You know, before you built a blog under your name, which I still have, but today my biggest blogging platform or content platform was LinkedIn. And what I do on LinkedIn is I do thought leadership. I have a newsletter there. I've got 25,000 subscribers. I run my content there. I've got 40,000 followers. On Twitter, I have about 35,000. The other platforms collectively about 30,000. So about 100,000 people. For somebody in my profession who's not a celebrity or doing music or
it's quite impressive.
Entertainment, it's impressive, right? But the thing that I think has changed before is that before brands used to lead the conversation, you know, you talk about Safaricom first, you talk about, you know, a certain organization first, but now the individual brands are becoming bigger than the corporate brands, thanks to social media. In fact, they say that Donald Trump only won the election because he went to about 5 to 10 podcasters, each who collectively had at least 10 million young male voters in America. And collectively, those guys who all endorsed him, including this guy was the biggest podcaster in the world.
Who's this, Joe Rogan?
Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
When they all endorsed Trump, they single-handedly, essentially handed the vote or got the votes for Trump to win the election.
Directly,
because those guys appeal to a young male demographic in the US. And what happens is that I've noticed that when you listen to podcasts, like I listen to some people religiously, you create what they call a parasocial relationship. I don't really know you, but because you're always in my ear and I'm always seeing you, I think I know you. I think you're my friend. And because I'm constantly getting this feed of information from you, when you decide to say Trump is the man, I don't even question it, right? So I think the personal brands are now moving to a place where they're now superseding and becoming more important than the corporate brand. And for me, I didn't even know that's what it was, because even when I started blogging initially, it was more like a journal to just write about technology, because I didn't like what I was seeing in the newspapers and other media, because they looked like cut and paste of what a journalist was given. There was no thought process. It wasn't coming from the point of view of a practitioner versus somebody who's writing on behalf. I was actually in the space so I can talk about it as being inside the space. And subsequently with the podcast and other things I do, that's what has happened. So increasingly what I've also seen is that when you have a good personal brand, and that basically means you're putting out content, you're sharing points of views, you're inspiring people, you're educating people, you're teaching people, it sort of spills over to your work. Meaning that clients come on board to the company because of what you're doing on the personal content and stuff on social media.
True. Yeah.
And I think going forward, that's going to be the big transition, that the personal brand is something that each and every one of us needs to invest in building, because that now allows you to have dividend in other areas. Okay? The other thing that's happening now that's so important is AI. For me, AI is very simple. AI allows you to do what was previously not possible as an individual or as an organization. And why do I say this? Remember I talked to you about the computer that we got when we were kids? I remember the first day it came, we opened the screen and the cursor, and I didn't know what was going on. And me and my brother were trying to type in what we wanted the computer to do. Exactly what we do now with ChatGPT. ChatGPT, please do this for me, da 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 da. I was trying to do that when I was 12 years old. Right? That's how many years ago?
It's quite a while
40
back.
plus years ago.
Yeah.
Computing has reached a point where that idea is now real. Now think about it for a second. You can take a picture of yourself now, put it on, Nano Banana, put yourself in a suit and have a nice picture for your passport.
I saw you as a, what was it, like a soldier of some sort.
Yeah, I've been playing around with it. I can
that.
go in there, I can create a content calendar in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I can go in there and I can create a business proposal. I won't be ashamed to say it. I've created plenty of proposals that have won sales that were largely created using ChatGPT. And now I think this paradigm shift is huge, because even just the other day, I think Microsoft and Google have now confirmed that 30% of their software is now AI generated. And they're on track to ensure that by 2030, 90% of software in the world will now be created using AI. What's going to happen to all the kids we told, go get a degree, learn how to code software, do data science, who essentially are going to be replaced using AI?
Machine.
So this is probably the biggest conversation in our modern times, because it's going to disrupt everything.
For sure.
And the thing they keep saying, which I don't necessarily agree with, they say something like, the person who's going to take your job is not the AI, but the person using AI. But I'd say that the future is going to belong to those people who, number one, understand how to tell a good story, which AI may not be able to do well, hence content creators, personal brands. And number two, the people who learn how to operate the AI. So think about them being almost like the managers of intelligent AIs, and have mastered the ability to make them do what they want.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you saw where I took the images and I converted them into something. What they call a prompt engineer, who knows how to make the most compelling request to the AI to give the most profound outcome. So if you can build your personal brand on social media and concurrently figure out how to use AI at a very high level, potentially you should be safe. That's what I would say.
Okay, so we shouldn't be scared, technically. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for having me.
At least we get to close thinking about the future. And we started right at the back, at the beginnings of. So I'd like to say, especially on this very day, I celebrate that 10-year-old young man playing around with codes, to the one who survived Nairobi, found their way through their entrepreneurship journey, and where you are now. We celebrate you and what you've done in the digital space. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Asante sana.
Yeah.
Where do we check out your podcast?
Okay, there's a number of things. You can go to, my podcast is on YouTube, Spotify.
Yeah.
Just look for Pure Digital Passion. You'll find it there. I also have my blog at moseskemibaro.com. In fact, if you just Google me, you'll find all those things. And yeah, that's where I share my thoughts, insights, ideas, inspirations around all things digital.
Yeah. Asante sana.
Asante.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Moses. Thank you. See? Right on. Asante sana.
On your next visit to Sugar Bowl, ebu treat yourself to some Sugar Bowl steak and eggs. Sounds simple, eh? I bet, eh? But how about this? Think about it. Sugar Bowl steak and eggs. Try it. Good steak, golden potatoes, eggs made just how you like them, and oof, peppers that bring the good mood. And how about some fruity tea while you're at it? Well, give it a try and find yourself talking, laughing, and lingering for more. The Sugar Bowl steak and eggs is something else. Akia nani. Come on, try it, maze, try it. And that's it for this episode of the Casually Human podcast with Martin Kigondu. Until next time, stay dope out there. You can recommend us to your friends, family, and follow us on Spotify, on the socials, and definitely on the YouTube. As for me, I'm at Kigondu on all different social media platforms. That is at KIGONDUW. And as a podcast, we are at casually_human_pod on IG, on X, TikTok, and everywhere you look for us. Until next time, peace.